So in this session, it's a session that's going to focus on what we've called the Prelude to an international consortium to develop artificial organs. And so what exactly does that mean? What it means is that there are groups of folks around the world right now who are already working in collaboration to develop the concepts and the structure for an international consortium that will bring together the best minds that can drive change and innovation to develop and bring to market artificial kidneys. The first speaker that I want to go ahead and bring up is a very good friend of ours, Danny Gallego, out of Spain. And Danny heads up the European Kidney Patient Federation. He's a longtime kidney patient and quite heroic in terms of his efforts, not only to manage his own life, but really to improve the lives of other folks all throughout Europe and the world. Danny, why don't you go right ahead?
Many thanks, Paul, for your collaborative effort from AAKP. We are honored to participate in this collaborative effort overseas and in a partnership with AKPF. I'm Daniel Gallego. I'm a president of the European Kidney Patients Federation, the umbrella federation that represents all over 75 million people with kidney conditions in Europe. And of course, it's a multi-stakeholder group representing all the kidney community in Europe. And we are trying to defend the people's human rights to survive. As a kidney patient undergoing hemodialysis 28 years since 1995, more than long 28 years, I know extremely well what it means to have a kidney replacement therapy such as dialysis. This therapy, even today, the treatments are far from adequate, with the majority of the kidney patients undergoing 3 times per week in a center, several hours, depending on a machine to survive in the dialysis unit. Dialysis only replicates a small fraction of the kidney function. So with a very limited lifestyle and huge nutritional and social restrictions, we are unable even to drink water. So you can imagine the humanistic burden of the kidney failure. We are here today to ask for your help because we need the big brains, we need the best brains all over the world, engineers, entrepreneurs, to give us a chance, to give us hope for the new treatments, new breakthroughs, and innovation in kidney replacement therapy. The artificial and implantable artificial kidneys give us the opportunity to avoid the prematurely deaths that occurs all over the year and each year all in the world. So without having access to the kidney replacement therapies, the number of human losses that occurs annually are unacceptable, and we are here because a resignation for us is not a responsible option. So we cannot look away, and we must appeal to the conscience and the solidarity of the countries with the upper incomes to combat and eradicate the premature deaths of people with kidney disease. As you know, health is a universal right, it's not a privilege. So let's build an equitable world together. So innovation is not just possible, it's imperative. Thank you very much for hearing us and for help us.
Thank you very much, Danny. And as you can see from earlier this morning and from Danny's presentation, patient stakeholders throughout the world, and especially in Europe, are a major factor that's going to be driving innovation and especially artificial organs. So I want to go to another part of the world right now and talk to a very good friend of ours that we've met through the United States Department of Commerce and through the U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia. We were first introduced in 2020 because Ethiopia is trying to expand its capability and capacities for caring for folks that have kidney disease. And we were introduced to Mr. Abdulkedir Gelgelo, who is the Director General of their Pharmaceutical Purchasing Supply Ministry. And he had a very practical issue in trying to come together with international engineers and patients and advocates and policymakers and companies, because in their country they have significant infrastructure challenges, including water and power, as you might imagine. But what they're taking a look at is how to expand new technologies and innovations and bring them to consumer markets in Africa, especially Ethiopia. So without further ado, let me go ahead and have our next speaker come up. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, AAKP. Thank you, George Washington University, for having me here to present the current disease of kidney disease in Ethiopia. So my presentation is, I am Dr. Abdulkedir Gelgelo, Managing Director of Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Supply Service, presenting to you on the dialysis service and kidney disease in Ethiopia. Just a little bit overview kidney disease in Ethiopia, and also the end-stage renal disease treatment approach in Ethiopia, which is very few about this. And unmet need of kidney failure, whether the problem, what is lacking in our system with dialysis, and the new innovative in kidney care, which will be artificial kidney, what will be here in Ethiopia, and so on, and stakeholder engagement. Chronic kidney disease in Ethiopia is like 12.2% prevalency, which is show according to some of the report released in 2020, as high as of 40% in the age less than 35 and 60% in the male population. And the deaths, which is commonly associated with poverty, associated with some of the disease, which has been like the AKI injury and so on, it is 2.5% of the total deaths, according to the WHO report in 2020. So this is making an Ethiopian 81 rank, according to that year report. The dialysis service in Ethiopia is only hemodialysis, which has AVF, FG, and CVC, which is commonly the only one that we're using currently in Ethiopia across the private and public sector. Service point for this service, dialysis service, is 3 public hospital currently giving service for this, and 25 private sector, which, in the current last 2 decades, there is emerging and increasing of private sector to give this service to the community. But only when you see at the public hospital, it's only like 3 public hospitals currently majorly giving service for dialysis. The cost is about, when compared to the private sector, is, like 41 up to $67 per session. In the private sector, that currently, costing per the patient, and the public server is in the public sector is either free or subsidized by government majorly, because it is a few hospital that has been currently giving this service. Yeah, as I said earlier, the increase in dialysis service is currently one of the major issue that we have a lot of patients really on the waiting list for this service, particularly for the private sector currently increasing, as you have seen in urban area, actually very located to the capital city and some of the regional capital city. That's only where we can get the dialysis service. Currently, hemodialysis, as I said, the only type of dialysis modality that has been offering for this in the stage renal disease patient in Ethiopia. The major cause for these days, as I already mentioned, is related to poverty, inadequate access to health services. Recently, hypertension and diabetic are also becoming a major cause of kidney disease in Ethiopia due to lifestyle and diet change. I just want to mention here the lack of services and unmet need for kidney failure in Ethiopia, one by one, lack of dialysis, and why is unmet need for these services. The vast majority of end-stage renal disease patients receive palliative care because they cannot afford or access to dialysis facility. In the private sector, there is expensive. Public sector, there is a long waiting queues to get that services. So access to dialysis service is very limited. And many of dialysis machine in those of the public sector is very old, and some is very breakdown. There is repeated maintenance, repeated pause between the service. And according to our data, which has recently from 2 major hospital, which we call it the Paulos and Zaudito Hospital. Currently, this hospital is giving service. Currently, there is a public-private partnership from one of the hospital in the public, like Menelik Hospital. They are giving the services. There is a long list of the patients waiting for this, but the machine is very, repeatedly all and breakdown in between these majorly 2 hospitals. Yeah, from the existing CERT-C dialysis machine, in a total of 2 major centers that I mentioned earlier, half of the machine is non-functional according to the data that we have. So this make impede the service across the nation, which is really waiting for the services. As you have seen, patient on the waiting list, there is the 1,300 patient in Addis Ababa, the capital city, with really waiting for the dialysis, which is majorly 800 patients is at the one of the biggest hospital that we have and currently giving service for dialysis. Like 800 patients is at the waiting list for getting this dialysis service. This shows there is a unmet need for this dialysis service. Why the challenge with dialysis service? The insufficient supply chain resulting in lack of consumable. Currently, as we have seen, lack of resource in some of the hospital because of the cost wise on the consumable issue, the price that required for supplies and medicine. Above all, there is a problem with supplies are not available for the consumer. I'm leading one of the supply chain organization. There is a problem that we have been getting some of the consumable for dialysis as well as the kidney transplant. Some of the medicine has no registered supplier because there is no local manufacturer, totally no local manufacturer for these supplies. Like one of the major challenge that we have is tacrolimus, and it's immunosuppressant, vitamin and so on. They are really lacking supplier because although we want to procure for the government public hospital as well as even for the private, there is no registered supply for some of the registered supplies from Europe, from the Asian country and so on. But because of the number, the volume of the product that we need is still very lacking. So there is repeated interruption for these services in this public hospital. So when you go to the private, there is a cost increase because they can get from different way to avail for their patients. But in public service, which is solely depend on our services, our product, it was very difficult to get this consumable. Probably I just offer some of register, which is local manufacturer in US and other country to come to Ethiopia really to register on those products so that we can get easily for really procuring for our public services. So out of pocket payment, all the machine that really break down frequently, some of waiting lists I already mentioned, long queuing and lack of digital system for the patient really to track who's really coming first or not, really which patient need arterial pump failure, power and so on. There is lack of trained technical staff, service and maintain those machine, lack of spare parts, majorly building water electricity infrastructure are some of the challenge that we have seen in dialysis service in Ethiopia. Having said that, artificial kidney in Ethiopia, currently one of the hospital, which we call it, St. Paulos Hospital is giving the service for kidney transplantation. Intervention by artificial kidney in Ethiopia, currently according to the data, which show that like 2020, 2021, there is no artificial kidney intervention in Ethiopia in that particular hospital. Although the artificial kidney is additional intervention, which really significantly impact the term of saving more life, increasing the quality of life, and also which doesn't require any access to blood vessel or anticoagulant therapy. Luckily, that this intervention is not currently available in Ethiopia, but there is a plan to make it available to the St. Peter Hospital, which is the only hospital that has been giving service to kidney transplantation. Yeah, and finally, when you talk about the stakeholder engagement in policy, in care decision, I have some few words on these issues. Access to dialysis service in Ethiopia require collaboration between government because of the cost, private sector, healthcare provider, patient organization, and other stakeholder. Although we have a different patient organization really fighting to give awareness for this totally about the renal problem and the challenge that they have actually across the nation. So this is they are really playing the leading role on this issue to really support, inform the community about the preventive issue on the renal issue, starting from the major cause of this disease, like poverty, as I say, access to health facility, and also the hypertension and diabetic, which is majorly current issue with Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is, introducing renal transplantation 2015 of Gregorian calendar. Until then, there is, I think, like 7 years since we started the transplantation. A few of transplantation has been occurred, but still we lack, as I say, a lot of consumable challenges with building infrastructure and so on. So this stakeholder at the association that has been working to avail this consumable, as well as giving awareness to have infrastructure according to the requirement that has been needed for those hospital. I think there is a few strengths to have this collaboration, but still, according to the need that we have, there are a lot of patients in the waiting list. Still, we have to be very collaborated on these chronic kidney disease issues to have and to avail the service, minimum service that they need. So the workers, the suppliers, the community, and the customer, all these need collaboration to avail the services to our community. And finally, I want to say on these issues that although there is some few organizations that have gone in collaboration to government, we want to have really avail those services, especially the consumable issue, the product issue. As I am one of the Ethiopian supply chain organization, the biggest only public service organization, which is really supplying 70% of public hospital and also health facilities. Like I have been supplying to 5,000 health facility under our organization. So one of the key area that we have been supplying is kidney transplantation and kidney dialysis consumable. So I want to urge all the stakeholder across the nation, across the globe, to come to Ethiopia to invest in supplying the dialysis services, as well as availing the consumable, which is really, really interrupted for these services. So we can have a room to communicate and to have really work together to avail this for our community. So this is a very few slide that I have on this global summit, which really helpful for one of our country that really in need of these critical services. I really thank you, Paul, and also AAKP, and also the George Washington University for giving me this chance and to present a few words on the current status of the kidney disease in Ethiopia. This may, bring attention to some of the country that really to support our country in terms of donation, or in terms of private sector engagement and so on, in terms of even public-private partnership to make and to alleviate the suffering of our patients, which is really on the waiting list and so on. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gallego, and a special thank you to the United States Department of Commerce and also our good friends at the American Embassy in Ethiopia for connecting us a number of years ago with Dr. Gelgelo. And to be able to work with somebody that's in the ministry in Ethiopia is very important. And so, as you heard, at the ministry level, there's interest in collaboration for artificial kidneys in Spain with Danny, and throughout Europe. You've heard it from patients. And so what does it actually look like to put these elements together and to create a consortium? Clearly, one of the largest components of that is the economics upon which it would ride and the economic justification for artificial organs. And for this, we were introduced to a fantastic expert at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Dr. Andrew Lowe, and we were introduced to him by our good friend, Dr. Murray Sheldon at the FDA. I'd like Dr. Lowe to go ahead and present an interesting concept here for how artificial organs globally could be funded with private sector and other investors in the mix. Dr. Lowe, go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Lowe, and I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk with you today about whether or not financial engineering can create an artificial kidney. Now, I have to begin with a bit of a disclaimer, which is that I'm not a biomedical expert by any means. I'm a financial economist by trade and training, and much of my last several years of research has been devoted to thinking about applying concepts in financial engineering to healthcare. And so I'd love to talk with you today about that application for thinking about artificial kidneys and other organs. Now, one of the things that I came across as I started learning more about the field of biomedicine is this, the valley of death. People kept telling me about the valley of death, and at first I didn't understand what they were referring to. Is it some place in Southern California? Wasn't quite sure. And after a while, I realized what they were talking about is the fact that there's a lack of funding for certain very important therapeutic efforts, including the development of an artificial kidney. And I didn't understand why there was a particular valley of death until I started asking more questions and realized that the answer actually has to do with financial economics, has to do with the fact that there's increasing risk and uncertainty in healthcare, not despite all of the breakthroughs that those of you who are in the field are pioneering, but actually because of those breakthroughs. You see, as we create these disruptive technologies that are wonderful for patients and their families, we're also making the existing investments less attractive because we're making them obsolete. And so increasing risk and uncertainty is largely responsible for the so-called valley of death. And that's something that we can deal with from a financial investor's point of view. So I want to first spend a few minutes talking about what investors are looking for. And to do this, I'm going to share with you a pop quiz that I give my first-year MBA students. And the quiz goes like this. I'm going to give you 4 different assets. I'm not going to tell you what they are or over what time period they span. I'm only going to show you what happens if you put $1 in each of these 4 assets and you leave it there for a multi-year investment horizon. The green line turns $1 into $2, not very rewarding, but not particularly risky. The red line turns $1 into $5, way more rewarding, but quite a bit riskier. The blue line is the most rewarding of all, turns $1 into $8, but way, way more volatile. And the black line is somewhere in the middle. So if you can have one and only one of these investments to put your life savings, your kids' college education fund, your parents' or grandparents' 401k, which would you pick? And it really doesn't look like there's a right or wrong answer because it's a matter of your risk preferences, risk-reward trade-off. Now, when I give this to my MBA students, most of them will not pick the green line. They won't even pick the red line. The blue line, occasionally, I'll get a few takers, but the vast majority will pick the black line. I suspect that's what all of you chose. So let me tell you now, those of you who've made your choices, let me tell you what you picked. First of all, the time period goes from 1990 to 2008. And for those of you who picked the green line, the very few of you, that is the safest asset in the world, known as US Treasury bills. And at least for the next 2 years, we'll see what the debt ceiling looks like in 2 years after the bill is up. But assuming that we in the United States have agreed to pay our bills, that's a very safe asset, but not particularly rewarding. And if you had put your money in that in 2008, you would not have done very well. The red line that I suspect many of you do have your money in, that's the S&P 500, the US stock market. And if you had put your money in that in 2008, well, congratulations, you would have done very well indeed. The blue line is a single pharmaceutical company, Pfizer. And if you had put your money in Pfizer in 2008, well, congratulations, you would have done even better. What about the black line, the most popular asset of all the audiences that I've ever presented this to? That is the feeder fund for the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme, which is why I had to stop it in 2008. That's when the Ponzi scheme blew up. And you can see how the Ponzi scheme grew so big because of the nature of that financial performance, at least on paper. Like a moth to a flame, all of us are attracted to high-yielding, low volatility assets. And in finance, we have a name for that. It's called the Sharpe ratio. That's the expected return of an investment above and beyond the risk-free rate divided by the standard deviation. And you can see that the Sharpe ratio for Pfizer and the S&P 500 are about the same, 0.43, 0.54. But at least on paper, before the Ponzi scheme blew up, the Bernie Madoff fund had a Sharpe ratio an order of magnitude higher. Now, why am I telling you all this? It's because biomedicine has had a Sharpe ratio that's been declining over the last several years. It's not that the expected returns are low. Certainly, biotech companies have made some very great successes, and big pharma companies like Pfizer have done very well. But the problem is that the most disruptive technologies have increased the risk to the point where the denominator of that Sharpe ratio has declined. And the denominator has increased, causing that Sharpe ratio to decline. And so what do we do about it? Well, this is where financial engineering can actually play a role. So here's a second pop quiz that I give my students, which is imagine that you've got an investment that requires $200 million upfront. It takes 10 years before you'll see any kind of a payoff. And the probability that you will get any kind of a payoff is 5%. 95% of the time, you'll get nothing back. How many of you would be willing to invest in this? Well, when I ask my students this one, I get no takers. Occasionally, I'll get one particularly courageous student who will raise her hand and say, Professor Lowe, you didn't tell us, in the unlikely event that you do get a positive payoff, what is that payoff? You see, most people don't even bother asking because when they see $200 million, 10 years, 5% success rate, no thank you, not interested. It turns out that these are the back of the envelope numbers for what it takes to develop a single anti-cancer. It's about 10 years to run the clinical trials. It costs about $200 million in terms of out-of-pocket spending to run those trials. And historically in oncology, the success rate is actually a little bit less than 5%. It's about 3.4%. And so for most people, this is just way too risky. However, if in the unlikely event you do succeed, it turns out that what you get is a drug that produces $2 billion a year in revenues from years 11 through 20. Now, why 11 to 20? Well, it's because a patent life typically goes for about 20 years. If the first 10 years are taken up doing clinical trials, then you get a remaining 10 years of cash flows. And at $2 billion a year for 10 years, that equals a single payday of $12.3 billion using standard financial analysis. So let me ask it a different way. Imagine if I offer you $200 million investment where 95% of the time you get nothing, and 5% of the time I'll write you a check for $12.3 billion. Would you take it? The answer is probably no. It's way too risky. And part of the reason is the Sharpe ratio. If you look at the calculations of what the Sharpe ratio is in this case, it's basically 0.02. So this is not going to be attractive to very many people. However, this is where financial engineering can help. What if instead of investing in just one of these projects, we invested in 150 of them all at the same time? Now, granted, we're going to require a lot more money. How much? 150 times 200 million or $30 billion. Where are we going to get $30 billion? Well, an economist has a very simple answer to that. The answer is this. Assume we have $30 billion. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't really answer the question, but give me a moment and I'll show you where we're going to get it. If we had the $30 billion, it turns out that this particular portfolio becomes very different than a single investment. Because with 150 projects, and let's assume for now that the projects are statistically independent, so you've got 150 shots on goal, to use a hockey or a soccer term, and the statistics tell you that if they're independent, that means that the risk goes down by the square root of the number of projects. In this case, the square root of 150. So the Sharpe ratio of this investment is 0.34. We've just increased it by an order of magnitude by creating a mega fund portfolio. Now, where am I going to get the money? How many of you would be interested in investing in this project? My guess is a lot more of you. And that's where I'm going to get the money. Not for me, I don't have it, but you all do. If I can change the risk-reward trade-off to make this more attractive as an investment for you, then I'll get a large amount of capital because it's a good investment. Never mind that it's doing good for patients, it is just a good investment. So can we really do this? Can we really raise the 30 billion? Well, the answer depends on the underlying risk-reward characteristics. If we can change the risk-reward characteristics to make this more realistic, that's where we're going to get the funding we need to get across that valley of death. So let me now turn to the topic at hand, which is developing artificial organs. How do we go about this? In the very same way, taking a portfolio approach, creating a mega fund to focus on developing an artificial kidney, for example. Now, the question is, what are the multiple shots on goal? Well, it turns out, based upon what I've read about the literature, you all know a lot better than I do, developing an artificial kidney is not just one activity. It's not just a one-shot deal. It requires a number of different components. In fact, I was surprised to learn that the kidney does a lot more than just filter our blood for waste. And the fact that the kidney is responsible for 6 or 7 different functions means that there are 6 or 7 different components of whatever it is that you're going to be creating as an artificial kidney. That means that there's a portfolio of intellectual property that you're developing that could have value in its own right. So for example, if part of that artificial kidney is to be able to balance electrolytes, clearly there are other uses for that in different contexts besides just in the case of an artificial kidney. And so if you think about the portfolio of intellectual property that one would need in order to succeed in that engineering feat, you can create that portfolio and then get investors to understand that the risk is going to be lower because you'll have a number of different ways to monetize that investment. Second, you'll want to identify and co-opt the relevant stakeholders by providing a clear narrative of what is possible. The fact that you can actually use all of these different shots on goal to achieve your objectives and provide multiple ways of investors earning a reasonable rate of return means that you have an opportunity to partner with them in many creative ways. For example, we know that dialysis centers are incredibly profitable in terms of the business that they conduct over the course of a given year because there are so many patients that require dialysis. So I've often heard it said that dialysis centers are dead set against artificial organs. I don't think that that's accurate. Now, it's true that they have their priorities in terms of their business, and given that they have a pretty sizable investment in their dialysis centers, they're not likely to eliminate that overnight. But what if it's possible to repurpose their facilities to help monitor, manage, and implement the rollout of these artificial kidneys? Well, then you might find that they would be particularly amenable to partnering as opposed to not being as focused or as interested. Third, by using science and engineering, you can actually reduce the risk and increase the Sharpe ratio. If you can show investors that because of your discoveries, because of the new technologies that are now possible, that you can actually engage in the same kinds of functions of a regular kidney, but doing so in a much more efficient and convenient manner than dialysis, that is something that investors will be very interested in. And finally, get patients involved. There is fewer powerful sources of motivation than patients and their loved ones. And many of them are happy to roll up their sleeves and participate in a number of ways, not just in clinical trials, but in advocacy, in talking to politicians, in being able to get non-dilutive financing. There are many different ways of being able to make use of that powerful resource. So let me wrap up by pointing out that my interest in healthcare finance is really from personal reasons, and I suspect many of you feel the same way. This was brought home to me in a very, very direct way with one of my MIT colleagues named Harvey Lodish. Harvey is a biologist at the MIT Whitehead Institute, and when I first heard Harvey's story, I decided right then and there, I want to be Harvey Lodish, and let me explain why. When I tell you his story, you'll want to be Harvey Lodish as well. In 1983, Harvey was approached by some colleagues to collaborate on a project involving helping patients dealing with a rare condition known as Gaucher syndrome. This is a single gene mutation that prevents your body from producing important housekeeping enzymes. And without those enzymes, fatty acids build up in your bone marrow, your spleen, and by the time you're a teenager, if you have a particularly severe version of this, you're dead. So this is a pretty serious condition. And Harvey and his colleagues figured out a way to develop an enzyme replacement therapy to deal with this condition. And in 1991, the drug Scheres was approved, the very first enzyme replacement therapy. And that drug and a number of its improvements have saved literally hundreds of thousands of lives. And you may have heard of Harvey's little startup called Genzyme. And in 2014, it was acquired by Sanofi for $20 billion. Now, that's not why I want to be Harvey, although it's not a bad reason, particularly from a financial economist point of view. I want to be Harvey because of what happened in 2002. You see, in that year, Harvey's daughter was pregnant with her second child, Harvey and his wife's second grandchild, a boy named Andrew. Great name, by the way. Andrew was diagnosed in utero with Gaucher syndrome. What are the chances of that? And so I talked to Harvey about this, and it was a very emotional conversation. And I said, Harvey, did you know in 1983 that you would be working on a drug that would one day save the life of your as yet unborn grandson? And Harvey said, absolutely not. 1983 was 20 years before we sequenced the human genome. I didn't know that I was carrying the gene. I just thought if I can do some cool science and help some patients, that would be wonderful. And so you can imagine that Harvey is a pretty popular member of his household, because in 2012, when Andrew turned 10, he developed the full-blown symptoms of Gaucher, but he's leading a perfectly normal life thanks to the drug that Grandpa helped to develop. This is why I want to be Harvey Lodish. Now, I don't have a PhD in molecular biology or an MD in medicine, so I will never be able to develop drugs that will help my as yet unborn grandchildren. But I realized something. I realized that we can all be Harvey Lodish if we invest in the drugs that will save our as yet unborn grandchildren. Finance doesn't have to be a zero-sum game if we don't let it. With the right kind of financing and at the right scale, it is actually possible to do well by doing good. And with all of your help, we can do it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lowe. And what you've heard is actually one of the brightest minds in financial markets and structures for developing investments. And we're very honored to have Dr. Lowe with us from MIT. So we have the financial piece from MIT. We heard the patient piece from Danny out of Spain, and we heard from Ministry of Pharmaceutical Supply and Purchasing in Ethiopia. Now what I'd like to do is go to my very, very good friend, Eveline Scheres, who serves as the general manager for the European Kidney Health Federation. And this is a fascinating organization because it's the most influential and impactful across Europe and the European Union. And Eveline, thank you very much for joining us live from Brussels. I wanted to ask you a couple of different questions. You're welcome. So we're talking about the Prelude to an international consortium, Eveline, which you and I have worked on for several years. And we're trying to lay out for folks so they understand the pieces that are coming together. And I was interested if you could give us some highlights from the meetings that you've literally just stepped out of over there in Europe on their insights on artificial organs and how progress is going.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think, I just walked out of the European Parliament, and every year EKHA, or the European Kidney Health Alliance, is hosting a forum about kidney or kidney care and on an actual topic. And this time the forum was called The Future of Kidney Care. And the future of kidney care, of course, for one, is very important for kidney patients at this moment, but also for future kidney patients. And what we today very much addressed was the need for innovation, because the impact on kidney patients is very big with the treatments we have now, but also a very actual topic, at least actual topic in Europe and also in the rest of the world, of course, is how we can reduce the carbon footprint. And innovation can help to reduce the impact in a positive way on both subjects. And when we started working together, I started working with EKHA in 2020. And the main ask for me was, how can I create awareness for chronic kidney disease in general? Because you must understand, in the European Commission, of course, people know that you can have a kidney disease, but that didn't really understood the idea that it was a standalone disease. So we have been working very hard on a strategy, and in this strategy, we built a dream, and which we called, how good would it be if we would have a regenerative kidney in 2030. So while we are writing this strategy, some organization called the AAKP built a phenomenal communication frame for the strategy. So we were working on the strategy, and he said, okay, the decade of the kidney, how brilliant is that? So, and you know, every good strategy only needs a very good communication. And also because, of course, kidney disease and no disease knows borders, it's the smartest thing to do to bundle the best brains and also bundle a lot of money, like Andrew Lowe was just explaining before. And we had some people in our network, also Fokko Wieringa, I think you saw a movie of him also pass in your conference. And Fokko knew people and people knew people, and then we teamed up. And from the start, everybody very much liked the idea, but also a good idea like this. And it from the one hand, it's sort of a simple concept. We need innovation. But on the other hand, it's very complex and very hard to realize at this moment because dialysis was invented 80 years ago. So we really should sort of like the Kennedy way, we want to have a moonshot. And that's when the idea of the international collaboration existed. And we also really thought it would be important because that was also my closing speech at the European Kidney Forum. Among all the people that are listening in the forum, everybody agrees. That's very nice. And that's, of course, very good. And you have a lot of bright minds. But we really should go out there and spread the message. And which group better to reach out to than politicians? Because if they support your idea, then it's a really good idea. So that's basically the idea we were addressing, and we worked out, and we have created together with a lot of European organizations, but also with American organizations in the nephrology world. We have created guiding principles for international collaboration, for which the idea is that the brightest minds all over the world come together. They already had a lot of ideas, so from the one hand, we can combine their ideas, but on the other hand, we can create a sort of multiplier effect if we team up with each other. On the other hand, we need finance, because money makes the world go round in the end. And yeah, so we worked out sort of the strategic framework of this international consortium. We are on the verge of the elected leaders to say, yes, very good idea. We are going to sign it, and we hope to see, to really launch this signing of Declaration Intent and the guiding principles before the end of this year.
You know, Eveline, you in your role, obviously you work with a lot of elected folks. Our president, Ed Hickey, our former president, Richard Knight, and myself have worked with elected leaders in the United States on both sides of the aisle. Can you give folks that are listening a sense for how invested elected leaders are in the EU on this issue?
Yeah, it's very important because you must see EKHA combines sort of the patients, nephrologists, nurses, and the foundation. But what makes EKHA very special is that we have direct contact to the members of the European Parliament. So we sort of use the science on nephrology, and we make advocacy message of it. And because normally science-based organizations don't have the expertise on advocacy and don't know the world of the European Parliament and European Commission, we help each other out in spreading the word. So we have a connection to 22 members of European Parliament, and you and we of course monitor very closely, the same as you do on the Hill, and whatever is going on there, what the dynamics are in the European Parliament, how we can make sure that CKD gets a role in that. And then we have 22 members of European Parliament that we say, hey, listen, we have scientific knowledge on this. We have created policy messages. Can you please put our policy message forward? And we are very much succeeding nowadays, because I think for 3-4 years ago, CKD was not mentioned anywhere in the European Commission. And this year in various documents already. And also we were represented in a plenary, it's called here in Europe, by 7 MEPs, and that's on World Kidney Day. So that was very, very good. So the first part of getting successful in creating awareness for chronic kidney disease is like, I would like to say, getting known and loved. And we really reached that part. And now we are really ready for the next step. And we really, and that's also the nice thing, I guess, of the team we have between the AAKP, EKHA, and the EKPF, is that we really have a can-do mentality. And I hopefully, together with the support of the most important organizations in Europe and in America on nephrology, together with leading politicians in the nephrology world, I think we really, it's a sort of, you create this great idea and you want people to adapt the idea. And if and more people adopt the idea, and you have to build mass. And one of my favorite films in building, and also it's very inspiring in building strategies, is The Field with Kevin Costner. If you didn't watch it please, because it's a very old movie already, but the phrase line there was, if you build it, he will come. And that sort of sums it up how we are working, because you can have a lot of yes, but that's not possible, and there's no money, and people are not listening. But it's turning the other way around. It's a sort of out-of-the-box way of thinking. What do we need? How should we build it? And we are going to build it. And I think we can set the next step in this process very soon this year. So that would be very nice.
Well, I tell you what, Hilde Woutmans has been an absolute gem from the European Parliament, and you work very closely with Hilde. Here in the United States, we have the benefit of working with Representative Larry Bucshon and Suzanne Delbany, who are the co-chairs of the Kidney Caucus. And can you give us some insights? This is kind of inside baseball a little bit, but for those watching, what's it like when you have elected leaders on both sides of the ocean who have common values and common sense about kidney disease? What are some of the reactions you get from their interactions?
Yeah, it's very nice. You also see that it's very human driven. In the end, they're only humans, eh? So, but it's nice. I think the passion about helping kidney patients is really what binds them. So I think they have their role and their leadership roles in the nephrology world on the European base and USA for a reason. And I must say, reaching out with the idea we had, and of course we helped them with the idea, but in the end, it's more like the agenda, finding a right date. Of course, you can imagine how busy these people are. We, of course, respect that. But that was basically the hardest part, because as soon as the people start to talk together, we basically don't have to do anything else, but to make sure that we put it in a proper process. But the passionate, also because of personal experience, you also notice that is also very helpful also with politicians, that personal experience with kidney disease from themselves or in the neighbor or for loved ones, it's very helpful. But I think they echo each other, and they also, it's of course very nice if you see that from both sides of the pond, the message is echoed. And yeah, it's very nice. It's very nice working with them. It's mostly the process and the procedure that takes a little bit of time, but not the willingness of the elective leaders. They are great.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Eveline, very much, and the work that you've done over with the European Parliament and the European Commission. We will keep up the efforts here with our allies in the U.S. Congress and good folks like former Secretary Azar, who's provided us a tremendous amount of inspiration. So thank you again for joining us, and look forward to working with you in the next couple of weeks to bring things home so we have something to announce of a structure.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to collaborate with you all, and hopefully it's not only Europe and America, but a lot of more countries in the future.
I think we have them. Thanks a lot, Eveline.
Good luck with your conference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.